Have you ever wondered why some people cross 70 and still move like they're 40, while others feel every one of their 50 years in a single flight of stairs? It isn't luck. It isn't just genetics. It's something much smaller, much quieter, and far more overlooked than anyone ever told you. Right now, without changing anything, notice how you're sitting. Are you even? Is your weight settled equally on both hips? Most people, the moment they're asked this question, discover something unsettling. One side of the body has quietly taken over, and it's been happening for years without a single warning sign until the day your back finally speaks up. This video, that silence, about the slow, invisible drift that happens inside the human spine long before pain ever shows up. And by the end, you'll understand two simple movements, backed by real physiology, that target the root of that drift, instead of just chasing the symptoms. Let's start with a question most people have never actually thought about. What is posture, really? Not the version your grandmother nagged you about at the dinner table. The biological version. Posture is the ongoing negotiation between your skeleton and gravity, a negotiation your body has been conducting since the moment you learned to stand upright as a toddler. Every hour of every day, your spine is making thousands of micro adjustments to keep your head balanced over your hips. Most of the time, you never notice, until one side starts losing that negotiation. Here's the part almost nobody explains well. Your spine is not a single rigid pole. It's a stacked column of vertebrae, cushioned by discs that behave less like solid rubber and more like water balloons under pressure. Each disc is mostly water, encased in a tough fibrous ring, and that water content is what allows your spine to absorb shock every time you walk, sit down, laugh, or simply breathe. In your 20s, those discs are plump and hydrated. But somewhere in the decades that follow, something changes, and almost no one is told what it actually is. The truth is less dramatic than your spine is falling apart, and more interesting than that. Spinal discs have no direct blood supply of their own. Unlike almost every other tissue in your body, they can't simply pull oxygen and nutrients from a nearby blood vessel. Instead, they rely on a process called imbibition, a slow, pump-like exchange where fluid is drawn in and pushed out through subtle changes in pressure. Movement is the pump. Stillness is the enemy. And this single fact quietly explains why a sedentary lifestyle affects your spine differently than it affects almost any other part of your body. Think of that for a moment. Muscles get blood flow just by existing. Skin regenerates through surface circulation. But your intervertebral discs depend almost entirely on mechanical motion to stay nourished, which means the 22 hours a day most adults spend sitting, driving, or lying down aren't just bad posture habits. They are, quite literally, hours where the disc tissue in your lower back is being underfed. Now here's where it gets more personal. When one side of your pelvis subtly tilts, even by a few degrees, and it happens slowly enough that you never feel it happening, your entire vertical column shifts to compensate. Researchers who study spinal biomechanics describe this as an asymmetrical loading pattern. In plain language, one side of your spine starts carrying more weight than the other every single day for years. And because your body is remarkably good at adapting, it doesn't complain immediately. It compensates quietly, until the day it can't anymore. This is usually the point where people say something like, "My back pain came out of nowhere." But it rarely does. What actually happened is that the imbalance had been building for a decade or more, and the nervous system finally hit its threshold. The pain isn't the beginning of the story. It's the closing chapter of a story that started years earlier, one heel, one hip, one long car ride at a time. So why does this accelerate so noticeably after 50? Partly because of something called sarcopenia, the gradual, age-related loss of muscle mass and strength that begins as early as your 30s and quietens further with every inactive year. The deep stabilizing muscles that run alongside your spine, the ones responsible for keeping that vertical column centered, are some of the first to weaken when they aren't regularly challenged. And because these muscles work silently in the background, most people never train them directly. They train what they can see in the mirror and neglect what actually holds them upright. There's also a bone-specific piece of this puzzle that deserves its own moment, because it changes how we should think about aging itself. It's called Wolff's Law, first described by a German surgeon in the 19th century, and it remains one of the most fascinating principles in human physiology. Wolff's law states that bone tissue adapts to the mechanical demands placed on it. Load a bone appropriately, and it responds by increasing density. Remove that load, and the bone begins to resorb, quietly losing mineral density over time. This is precisely why astronauts in zero gravity lose measurable bone density within weeks, despite eating perfectly healthy diets. Gravity, and how we interact with it, is doing more work for your skeleton than most people ever realize. Which brings us to a critical, often misunderstood truth about aging bones. Many people over 50 are told to avoid impact entirely, to protect their joints by minimizing any kind of jumping or jarring movement. And for certain conditions, that caution is genuinely necessary. But for a large number of otherwise healthy adults, this advice, applied too broadly, may be quietly working against them. Because if bone density responds to load, and impact provides one of the most efficient forms of load, then avoiding all impact indefinitely can remove one of the few remaining stimuli telling your skeleton to stay strong. This doesn't mean sprinting up stairs or attempting a box jump at 60. It means something far more measured, far gentler, and according to current movement science, remarkably effective when done correctly. Low amplitude, controlled loading, movements that stress the bone just enough to trigger adaptation, without the joint trauma of high-impact training. Let's talk about circulation for a moment, because this is where the story connects in a way most people never expect. Your calves are sometimes referred to by physiologists as your body's second heart, and that nickname isn't poetic exaggeration. When your calf muscles contract, they compress the deep veins running through your lower legs, physically pushing blood upward against gravity back toward your heart. This mechanism, known as the skeletal muscle pump, plays a measurable role in venous return, particularly in the legs, where blood has the furthest distance to travel home. Here's the connective thread that ties all of this together. Movements that engage the calves through rhythmic, controlled contraction don't just support circulation in your legs. They influence pressure and fluid dynamics throughout the lower body, including, indirectly, the same imbibition process your spinal discs depend on to stay hydrated. Nothing in the body works in true isolation. Your heels, your hips, and your spine are part of one continuous mechanical and circulatory system, and that's precisely why targeted, low-impact movement can influence more than the area you're directly working. Now let's actually walk through the two movements this video is built around, the ones referenced in the title, and more importantly, why their specific mechanics matter more than most people assume. The first is a controlled heel raise and alternating drop, performed with your arms extended overhead and your legs pressed together. Standing with your feet together does something subtle but important. It narrows your base of support, which forces the deep stabilizing muscles along your spine and pelvis to engage more actively just to maintain balance. Raising your arms overhead elongates the entire kinetic chain from your wrists to your heels, encouraging your vertebrae to stack more directly on top of one another, rather than compressing into the slouched, shortened posture most of us default to after a lifetime of sitting. From there, lifting onto your toes and gently alternating a small heel drop, then right, creates a subtle rhythmic loading pattern through the lower leg and up into the pelvis. It isn't about of the drop. In fact, most people should keep this movement remarkably small, closer to a centimeter than an inch. The goal, intensity. It's controlled, repeated mechanical stimulation delivered along a properly aligned vertical axis. When your body drifts out of that alignment, when the hips shift back or the torso leans forward, the load stops traveling evenly through the spine and starts concentrating unevenly instead, which is precisely the pattern we're trying to correct in the first place. The second movement builds on the same foundation, using small, controlled hops instead of heel drops. Same posture, arms extended, feet together, spine as vertically stacked as you can manage. But now, instead of alternating heel taps, you introduce brief, low-amplitude hops, lifting only a centimeter or two off the ground. This slightly increases the mechanical load compared to the heel drop variation, engaging Wolff's law more directly by asking bone tissue to briefly bear and then release impact force, in a range most joints can tolerate comfortably when performed with soft, slightly bent knees on landing. The reason instructors emphasize soft knees so heavily isn't arbitrary. A stiff, locked landing sends shock directly upward through the joint, with almost nothing absorbing it along the way. A slightly bent knee, by contrast, allows the surrounding muscles and connective tissue to distribute that force gradually, protecting the joint while still preserving the loading benefit the bone tissue needs. What's genuinely interesting here is the psychological layer underneath the physical one. Most people, when attempting either of these movements for the first time, unconsciously begin to cheat within the first 30 seconds. The shoulders creep forward, the hips push backward, the eyes drop to the floor. This isn't laziness. It's the nervous system's automatic response to fatigue, quietly rerouting effort along the path of least resistance. Recognizing that tendency and gently correcting it in real time is arguably more valuable than the movement itself, because it retrains a pattern of body awareness that extends far beyond these 2 minutes of practice. This is where the real transformation tends to happen, not in the muscles first, but in attention. Most adults haven't consciously felt their own spinal alignment in decades. Life happens at the level of tasks, not sensations. You reach for the coffee cup, you check the phone, you carry the grocery bags, all without a single thought about how your spine is distributing that load. These two movements, slow and almost meditative in their simplicity, force a return to that lost sensation. And that returning attention, that renewed relationship with your own vertical structure, may end up mattering just as much as the physical loading itself. It's worth being honest about something here too. No 2-minute daily movement is a cure-all, and anyone promising instant, dramatic transformation from a few minutes of heel raises is overselling what physiology actually supports. What the current understanding of biomechanics and bone loading does suggest, however, is that consistent, correctly performed, low-impact movement can meaningfully support postural awareness, muscular balance, and mechanical stimulation of bone and disc tissue over time. That's a miracle. It's simply how the human body has always worked, and arguably always will. There's also an emotional layer to aging and mobility that rarely gets discussed with any nuance. For many people over 50, the fear isn't really about the back pain itself. It's about that pain represents. The quiet worry that independence is slipping, that the version of yourself who could kneel in the garden for an hour or carry a grandchild up a flight of stairs without thinking twice might not come back. That fear is completely human, and dismissing it with generic positivity does nobody any favors. What actually helps is understanding the mechanism well enough to feel some agency over it again. Not blind hope, informed action. And informed action starts with recognizing what's actually within your control. You cannot reverse the natural, gradual changes that come with decades of living, but you can influence how your body responds to load, how efficiently it circulates fluid through tissues that depend on movement to stay nourished, and how aware you remain of the subtle asymmetries that quietly build up in daily life. That's not a small thing. That's the equation. If you want to actually apply this rather than simply understand it, the progression matters more than intensity. Begin with the heel drop variation alone, just a minute or two, ideally in the morning, when the spine has had all night to rehydrate and is naturally a little more receptive to gentle movement. As that becomes comfortable and your balance feels steady, extend the time gradually and begin layering in the low hops, always prioritizing soft, controlled landings over height or speed. There's no version of this where rushing produces a better outcome. The nervous system rewards consistency far more than intensity, particularly with anything involving balance and coordination. It's also worth saying plainly that these movements aren't appropriate for everyone in every circumstance. If you're managing a diagnosed spinal condition, a recent injury, significant balance issues, or any concern involving bone density, the responsible step is a conversation with a physician or physical therapist before adding new loading movements into your routine. Understanding the science behind a movement is valuable, but it doesn't replace an individualized medical assessment, and no responsible source should suggest otherwise. Step back for a moment and consider the bigger picture this all points to. We tend to think of aging as something that simply happens to us, a slow subtraction we have no say in. But the biomechanics of the spine tell a slightly different story. Your body isn't just aging on a fixed timeline. It's constantly responding to the signals you send it, through movement, through stillness, through the countless small mechanical choices made across a single ordinary day. The spine that feels stiff at 55 isn't necessarily the inevitable result of 55 years passing. It may simply be the result of years of signals that told it stillness was safe and movement was optional. Somewhere between the hours you sit at a desk, the miles you drive without moving your hips, and the years that quietly accumulate in between, your body has been listening the entire time. It doesn't judge. It doesn't complain until it absolutely has to. It simply adapts to whatever pattern you repeat most consistently, which means the next pattern you choose to repeat, however small, however unremarkable it feels in the moment, is a message your spine is quietly receiving right now. Maybe the real question isn't whether 2 minutes a day can change your spine. Maybe this. What has your body been trying to tell you quietly for years that you finally have enough information to actually hear?